Welcome to Planet of the Associations. I'm Seth Kahn.
And I'm Mark Levy.
And we're here to shake your world. Not the last episode, but the episode before the last episode, I promised to take you someplace that it's hard to get to, someplace you don't normally go to. And I want to take you into Langley, the CIA headquarters. I've had the opportunity to visit it more than once. I have no security clearance, which means that I can talk about anything that I did or saw there. I will tell you that I was not there on a top secret mission. I was there because of my writing. They brought me in. And also because of my writing, I was actually looking for their CIO to make a contribution to my second book, which she did. So if you want to read that, you got to get Getting Innovation Right. And you can look up Central Intelligence Agency in the back and you can jump to the segment she's doing. But
the CIO of the CIA.
EIEIO.
Well, and when you were telling me about this, I said, are you really allowed to speak about this stuff? And you said, I don't have security clearance. By definition, I should only be shown things that are publicly accessible, like public knowledge stuff. It's like, so yeah, they're not showing me anything top secret.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I remember driving into Langley. It was a lot of fun for me because I'm kind of a spy nerd. So it was really cool to go into the toll booth and there were the guys in the blue.
Before you I won't, but you reminded me, I love the museum. I hope it's still open. The Spy Museum.
Yes.
There's one in Washington, D.C. There's one in New York. And it's one of the only for-profit museums in the United States. One of the things, when I went there the first time years ago, they had a cafeteria connected to it, and all the food was themed spy. So one of the hot dogs was called the Soviet Block Dog. Anyway, back to your story.
In the CIA gift shop, they sell top secret barbecue sauce. So there you go.
Right.
When I went into the lobby, I, of course, wanted to take a picture of that beautiful logo on the floor, which they would not let me do. I had to give up all my electronics. And then I was escorted back through the building, which looks like your typical government building, meaning there's no fresh paint on the walls. But there was I see a cat's tail right there under.
Yeah, that's Mojo.
Hey, Mojo.
I have a black cat named Mojo.
All right.
That's why I went out of picture for a second, because Mojo likes to eat papers and he went into a box of mine. I promise you, the other week I was talking to a client and Mojo had eaten a letter of agreement in my box. And I'm not joking about that. I showed the client. I said, this clause is gone. It's like a hole in it. So he's trying to do it again, by the way. So I apologize. All right. Go, Mojo. Go, buddy.
Multi-special blog.
Right. So you went into Langley and you wanted to take a photo of the amazing CIA logo on the floor. They said, no.
No dice. No. Couldn't let me do it. So I got escorted back. We walked through. There was a little museum. It was very cool. I saw like a beetle, dragonfly that was a camera. It was, totally artificial, looked very real. And they had some videos of using it going into tents so it could observe and listen. There were really cool paintings on the wall. We went up the elevator. There were some doors that had safe apparatus on them. So that you had to turn the knob to get the combination right and a big handle to unlock it. Who knows what strange things were behind there.
So in other words, the doors didn't have just push button locks on them. You're saying they had like a bank safe.
Yes, that's what it was like something really. Yeah. And I remember when I walked into the office of the CIO, the person who was my escort yelled, "Unsecure!" Like if you weren't in earshot, you wouldn't know that. If you were busy in the middle of a phone call and you missed it, you wouldn't know it. I thought there'd be like a light or something that would come on, something that would be unavoidable, right? Instead, they just yell, "Unsecure!" And they sat me down at this little table to wait. And the magazines on the table, the periodicals on the table were like guns and ammo and, military defense systems and weaponry and things like that. And while I sat there, the communications people were talking to the CIO about what she was and was not allowed to tell me. And I could hear the entire conversation because the door was open. And I went through this little thing like, do I go tell them that I'm out here and I can hear everything, thereby divulging that I've heard everything they've said? Or do I just keep my mouth shut and wait? And I picked the latter. And, I didn't listen hard. It wasn't what it was about. Anyways, it was a real joy to be inside Langley. It was fun to go to the gift shop. It was fun to talk to the CIO, to see the museum.
What were some of the gifts?
Well, there was the top secret barbecue sauce. There was sweatshirts that said CIA. And I'm like, who's going to wear this? Because if you're working in the CIA, you're definitely not wearing it. And if you don't work in the CIA, why would you walk around with a big sweatshirt that says CIA on it? I got a jacket, which I still have, that has the logo of the CIA. And underneath it, it says, "In God we trust, all others we monitor." It got a good sense of humor in the gift shop, you know? The campus was huge. I didn't realize how big it was. I guess you can tell if you look at an aerial map. But it was really, really large. And I even got lost driving around in it for a while. But, anyways, found it. So that was a place where I went that most people don't get to go. And you and I were talking a little bit about how the sausage is made when it comes to innovation. And that a lot of people don't see all that goes into actually delivering the value that comes out.
Right. Well, and another thing what I was saying was, and this is more from a marketing and communication standpoint. I tell people, I say, if you only tell people what it is they already know, they have no reason to listen to you. So it behooves you. Consider yourself behooven. It behooves you to pepper what it is you're saying in speeches, in documents, in websites, in books, whatever it is you're doing in communications, press releases. Like, you've got to put in things that surprise people, because otherwise they're not going to listen. They're going to say, "Oh, I know what it is this person or this organization is going to say. I'm tuning out." So it is like, surprising them is not a nice to have. It is like, you've absolutely got to do it. And actually, a very common thing for me to do is let's say I'm writing some piece of communication or so. I'll say, what do I know about this thing that I want to write about that they don't know? What do I know that they don't know? What ideas, insights, and stories do I know that they don't know? If I'm thinking about a speech, I use the same thing, or a book. And it can be, what do I know that 80% of them don't know? It doesn't mean everyone doesn't know it, but just in general, they don't know. I remember years ago, one of my clients kindly sent me an email, and it was a query from a reporter who was writing an article for Fast Company magazine, the business magazine, on how to be a good business conversationalist. And this reporter says, the client said to me, Mark, in the email, he said, "Mark, you're one of the best business conversationalists I know. You should be interviewed for this article on being a good business conversationalist." I don't know that that's true, but I thank them for it. What I am is very competitive. So I said, yes, I'm going to get in this. I like challenges, right?
Right.
So I'm going to get in this. So I sat down there, I opened up my a document, and I started typing into it. And the first thing I thought about is I said, okay, who am I up against? Right? This is positioning. I'm a positioning expert, right? So who am I up against? Probably other communications experts. And then I said, what is it that they're likely to say? I don't know exactly what it is they're going to say, because I'm not them. But about being a good business conversationalist, they're going to say things like, you need to listen more than you speak. They're going to say you need to listen to the other person closely, forget about yourself. They're going to say, ask questions that draw answers out. All these things I agree with, and I do. There's nothing, it's not like it's antithetical, but I knew if my answers sounded anything like those answers, there'd be almost no chance of me getting into Fast Company, because I blend in with everyone.
Right.
So I said to myself, okay, now that I know who my competition is, and I think I know what it is they're going to say, now what do I know that they don't know? Or what do I know that 80% of them don't know? Or what do I know that they may know, but they just haven't thought to say it? Right. So I started to write down all these ideas and stories and whatnot from the email. And I composed my entire email to the Fast Company reporter based on what I knew that they didn't know. I said, dear so-and-so, I see you're writing this article about being a good business conversationalist. I do this for a living. I'm this. Let me give you my 2 cents. And then I just wrote idea after I wrote 3 or 4 ideas and stories down there. And then I said, I'm happy to have you interview me. Here's my email and here's my cell phone or so. And I sent it off to her. And to this day, I have never heard from her. She never got back to me. She didn't ask me to be interviewed or anything like that. But a month after I had sent it, I got an alert from LinkedIn that said, you've been written about. And I clicked on it, and it was the article that she had written, how to be a good business conversationalist. And most of the stuff I put in the email was actually in the article as if we had interviewed, because not only did I think, oh, she's going to want to write about unconventional stuff, right? Because she doesn't want to blend in. So I put in unconventional stuff, but I also wrote it well. Right? I'm a professional writer. So and the reason why I paid attention to how I wrote it is because I said to myself, well, let me take as much effort away from her as I can. Let me do as much of the work for her so she can concentrate on other things. Does that make sense? So I'm always, always, always thinking when I'm creating something or when my clients are creating something, what do you know that most people don't know? And how can you give enough of it out there in a way that's consumable so that people don't have to work to consume it? How do you make them trip over it? Because it's just there. Does that make sense?
And that's a core set of skills for an association CEO, what you just described. Because, if you think about any association CEO lands in an organization where all of the members know more about the topic than they do, right? Even if they're from that field. Because the field is so large, they only know a tiny segment of it. But many association CEOs will start with nothing. They'll start or close to nothing. They don't know anything about, you might have a CEO at the American Geophysical Union who's not an earth or space scientist, right? Or a CEO at the American Thoracic Society who's not a pulmonary specialist.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that CEOs of associations. Right. Oh, they're right. That's true.
In fact, I would tell you, as somebody who's worked with over 100 association CEOs, that those organizations that choose someone from their field have a serious disadvantage from those who choose an expert association executive. And the reason is because it's a very clear, differentiated skill set to run an association well. And if you're a cardiologist, at the American College of Cardiology, you don't have that. If you're an earth or space scientist at AGU, you don't have that. But if you are a certified association executive, or maybe not even certified, but you have deep expertise in that space, then you're going to land on your feet and you're going to be able to take that organization places it wouldn't otherwise go.
You remind me, I was with a client a while back, a few years ago at Crotonville, which is the big executive campus, enormous for Procter & Gamble, I think. Yeah. And so we were seeing courses and whatnot that were being taught there. And I remember the head of the whole unit was showing us around. And I forgot I knew this. But they didn't have a gift shop. That's why I probably blocked it out of memory. I remember him saying to us, he said, we train leaders not to be specific to any individual division, because we think then they're based on content. They may not develop their leadership skills. It may be their expertise in the subject matter that makes them a leader, and maybe they're not the best then at collaboration and whatnot. So we on purpose train our leaders and move them around so that they're just excellent leaders with the ability to lead a whole bunch of different units doing different things in very unusual, different ways from one another. together. And that to me was revelatory. And you're reminding me of that right now.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And also, if you have the skills of an association leader, there not only are there certain competencies that you wouldn't share with people who are specific to that profession or trade, but you're going to be able to apply, just as you described, your leadership to anyone that you're interfacing with. It could be a member of the media. It could be a partner. It doesn't have to necessarily be someone who belongs as a member to that organization. And that leadership skill set is extremely important. In fact, I will tell you that in all of my experience in terms of running grand challenges, the CEOs who are most exceptional at achieving their grand challenges are also expert facilitators. They are really good at, determining the energy of a group, giving them exercises that brings their energy up, that focuses their attention. They know when to go divergent, when to go convergent. They even understand tactics, like they know when to use sticky notes versus dots or something like that, right? It's just an interesting phenomenon. That skill set around running groups makes for really good leadership when it comes to pulling together alliances and partnerships of divergent groups and getting them to perform towards a common agenda.
Is knowing how to deal with groups like that, is that something that's inherent in them, or is that something that they studied on purpose, or is that from just having been in lots of facilitations that they pick up on? I'm sure it's different from person to person, but what do you think the general?
I think generally speaking, facilitation is an acquired skill. So they probably have some curiosity about it and they just pick up strategies and tactics along the way. I think very few facilitators are just naturally good at it. They might start from a place of having some, natural aptitude, but they have to build on it to get to be really good at it.
What are, if someone wanted to learn to be a good facilitative leader, what are one or two things that you would strongly recommend them to do?
Just first of all, pay attention when you're in a room. It's like if you want to be a good storyteller, the best thing to do is to listen to stories well told, right? So pay attention when you're in a room where the energy's going, where people are doing activities. Ask yourself, what's the facilitator doing now? How are they achieving this? A lot of times really good facilitators, one of the things they have in common with really good association CEOs is they know how to lead from behind. I'll tell you two attributes of the most successful events I have ever facilitated. One is that I'm rarely in front of the room. The other is that the agenda that we designed is often completely diverged from. So rarely am I in front of the room because people are talking to each other. They're not talking to me. That's really important. And some of the best events I've ever done is when the group has gelled to such a point that they've said, we can really move together now in this direction. It's not on the agenda at all, but this is what we want to do. And I will oftentimes get together with the leader. We'll have a powwow and we'll say, this is it. Let's give them the reins. Let's watch them go. And then you get underneath them. In fact, I remember, I'm not sure this is a direct connect, but I remember I was working in a really large energy company. It was at the time the number one in terms of value on the planet. It was number one. We were dealing with a situation where headquarters, which was overseas, was telling the folks in the Gulf of Mexico what to do. And the people in the Gulf of Mexico were making more money than any other place on the planet. So they were resentful that they were being told what to do. And headquarters was really getting it wrong. They were really spinning and putting propaganda out. And what they wanted people to do, there's a cattail. What they wanted people to do was the right thing to do. But the way they were trying to convince them to do it was all wrong. And it was my job to get the Gulf of Mexico on track with this. And so we brought these groups together from headquarters and from the Gulf, and we brought them together in a room, and we did a lot of pre-work. We networked with people. We got the vice president of operations to be there. We did all kinds of stuff to really set this up so it would work. But it all came to a single moment where a fight almost broke out. And the people at headquarters were screaming at the people in the Gulf of Mexico that they must do it the way that the headquarters was telling them to do it, because that's what would make the most money for the whole company all over the planet. And the people in the Gulf of Mexico were telling the people at headquarters, you're putting a spin job on me. You don't even know what you're talking about. You guys are, breathing rarefied air. You're up on the, who knows what floor of some skyscraper somewhere, and you have no idea what it takes to harvest oil and gas and make a profit doing it. And me and the other guy who were facilitating were really kind of like, biting our nails because it looked like they were physically going to come to blows. And then all of a sudden, the guy from headquarters admitted that it was a spin job. He said, "You're right. We don't know. But we know in our hearts it's the right thing to do. And besides, all of our competitors are doing it." And the guy from the Gulf of Mexico said, "I can work with that."
Oh,
and
I didn't expect that answer.
I know. And the whole thing shifted. And then it was all that we could do, the facilitators could do to keep up with them. They were off to the races going 100 miles an hour faster than we had thought that they would go. And we made tremendous progress in the rest of the day. So that's good facilitation when you can create that environment. I mean, it was risky. There was a lot of tension in the room, but then we could completely get out of the way and the participants could lead. Now, we can't take all the credit for that, right? Because we would never have created a conflagration, but the fact that we were able to get underneath them and discern when it was they were ready to take the reins themselves, that was expert facilitation. So that's an example.
I love that story. That reminds me of sometimes in the work I do, I have to make hard decisions. I do so relatively easily. And someone asked how I do that. And I said, it's because I look at projects that I'm working on, with clients or my own projects. I look at them as works of art. Oh. Like we're creating a work of art. It's a painting, it's a sculpture, right? It can be a project in an organization, but I think of it as a work of art. And so the reason why I'm able to make these decisions is because I look at the work of art as independent of me or them, of the client. In other words, like, here's what the painting or the sculpture or the show or the trick here's what that needs. And that's independent of whether that's good for you and me. It's all in service of that thing that's up there above us.
Beautiful.
Does that make sense? Yeah. So in just looking out for the benefit of the thing being created, that kind of removes ego from it. And it also removes fear from it. Because it's not about, like, it doesn't matter what you and I think. It's this thing we're creating, and this thing we're creating demands X.
Right.
So we need to do X.
Right. That reminds me of, there was a famous speech that Frederick Douglass made. And this was highlighted in Will Smith's latest series that came out on Netflix called Amend. It's about the 14th Amendment. And in this speech, Frederick Douglass was invited. This was after he had escaped slavery, and he had taken on the cause of making African-American citizens in our country. And this was before they were citizens. And he had been invited by this group to speak on the 4th of July. And so he went there, and there were 600 white people in the audience, and he was on stage, and he was a very good speaker. And he realized that he had to put fire underneath them to get them to act. That these were all people who were friendly to the idea that slavery should be done away with, but they needed to be more than friendly to it. He needed people to take action, right? And so he starts off by complimenting the audience and talking about how wonderful the Constitution is, and that this founding document has created this country, and it's been so good for them. This is in like the latter part of the 19th century. So the United States is somewhat well established by that point, although of course the Civil War was fomenting and all of that. But still, he was congratulating them on the successes that they had in building this robust economy and really creating a set of guiding principles that were serving them well. But then he says, and he says something like, "Pardon me," at some point. He says, "I'm not with you. The 4th of July is not my holiday. It's yours." And he starts to lay out the case for why Black people experience this country not as their own country, and what the resolution for that is, which is these people to pick up that standard and run with it. And in the movie or the TV series Amend, the narrator says Frederick Douglass wasn't speaking to those 600 people. He was speaking to the future. And here we are today, right? Talking about that speech. I think that one of the things that great leaders do is that they see what's possible and they speak to that instead of speaking to the circumstances that we're mired in, and that reminds me when you talk about the work of art, it's like that higher ideal, that higher purpose.
Right. Yeah. I love what you just said. Yeah. It's this idea of being able to step so far back from something that you're just looking at it, through its perfection, even though perfection, we talked, I think last time about perfection's the wrong thing. You don't want to, but I mean this in the best possible way, stepping back at it so you can look at it without unnecessary value judgment. It reminds me as I'm talking about this, I think that I'm not a therapist, but I think I've differentiated enough therapists to think that I understand one way that they go about things is that there's a type of therapy where they'll look, or a technique at least, where they'll look at a symptom and they want you to look at the symptom as separate from you. Like, in other words, you wouldn't call yourself a smoker because that's over-identifying with your symptom. You would call yourself a person who at times smokes. So that way you can separate yourself enough from it that it's not overpowering to you, and it allows you to make changes around it. A lot of this stuff has to do with identity, like who you see yourself at in all the instances that we just talked about. It's like, who are you? What's your identity? What's your ability to separate from it or to be empathetic to other people's identity and what, is part of that?
And that's something that associations really suffer from, is the over-identification with the membership or the current state of the sector. And I think when you see really great association leaders, they are able to step back like that and see what's possible, right? So for example, if I'll just make up something, I'm the CEO of the Science Association. If I'm all in the weeds around what scientists are struggling with today and the fact that there's anti-scientific sentiment in this country and all of that, I can get really caught up in the issues of the moment. But if I can imagine a future where, like, let's say 80 to 90% of the American population understands science and values it for what it can do for us, and then I can work toward that end, then it lifts the aspiration up. And it makes it possible to see things that are necessary to cross that bridge, which you just won't see by looking at the ground beneath your feet. So I think that a lot of associations can really benefit from that kind of visionary leadership.
Right. How would you define identity?
Well, for an individual or for an association or for
either, like, what are the ingredients?
I think the identity is how you categorize yourself in your own mind. Who am I essentially? Am I a man? Am I a guy with a math degree? Am I a storyteller? Am I a dog owner? Am I an amalgam of all of these things? Your identity is that which you carry around with you that you use to define yourself. There's real value in having a strong identity, but there's also real danger in it. And I remember I got interested in Kabbalah when I was in college. I had taken Hebrew, 2 years of Hebrew to satisfy my language requirement. And it was after that. And I decided to take classical Hebrew, which is the language the original Bible was written in. And that kind of leads over. There's a lot of people in Kabbalah, the mystical side of Judaism, that study classical Hebrew. And there was a lot in the Kabbalah literature where they said you don't want to teach Kabbalah to someone who's younger than 40 years old. And the reason is because it will completely disassemble your understanding of the universe. And before you're 40, your ego is just not strong enough to handle it. You'll go down with the ship. So I think, identity has this kind of role where initially it's really important to us because it helps us locate our place in the world. But if we go too far, then it starts to constrain our place in the world. And that's maybe what that's speaking to.
Well, first, I didn't realize your study of Kabbalah, and I knew that there was a similarity between you and Madonna, and I just could not put my finger on it.
Thank God.
Now I said, what is it about Seth that reminds me of Madonna? And so now I know that. But I mean, human beings, we're so changeable and we're composed of so many different parts. And even in those parts, we're not consistent.
That's right.
So it's interesting that we decide that we have a certain kind of solid state, steady identity when we really don't. Like anything that you say that you are, I could point out parts when you're not.
Right.
But like you would be offended by that. It's like, oh, what are you kidding me? Or something like that. So it's just interesting how we think.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So, and we'll be spending more time taking a look at how we think in the next episode of Planet of the Association.
And we're going to be looking more at how Seth is like Madonna.
And we're going to be finally bringing origami into the conversation. I'm still waiting for that.
Right. We will next time.